Powered Sourcing. And as usual, I am joined by Mr. Roy Anderson, who is a lecturer extraordinaire at Northeastern University in the supply chain program. And I am Anders Lillevik, founder of Focal Point. Today, we're going to talk about AI-powered sourcing and how that is changing everything that we used to know about sourcing it from back in the day. So let's just jump right into it. To get to the next slide here. So as I said, we're going to talk about how AI is changing the sourcing landscape, and what we used to do manually and tactically has changed dramatically with the advent of AI. And I especially want Roy to talk about how we are training and are educating our students in the supply chain field now that we have all these great tools to help us out. Now, as we get into this, as usual, I would love to understand where you guys are joining us from. So if you can drop your location in the chat, that would be awesome. And just before we get started, Roy, what are you guys? What are the kids learning these days?
Yeah, so it was actually just today. I had teams presenting on how they're building agentic agents that can take action. So each of the teams, one team was call out your entire list of suppliers and one by one go through and do an entire risk analysis. And of course, they build out the areas of intensity, how much review, level of activity, whether it's a tier, B tier, C tier supplier. And then when any of the results come back in below certain criteria that they build in, the AI agent then goes out and asks for certificates, asks for due diligence, sets up an audit, all those actions to get things rolling and moving with no human intervention. This is all just triggered, and you go through hundreds of suppliers and then pick out the ones that are going to become a problem. So that's one. Next team went in there and said, all right, we're going to be doing, here's our spend analytics. Here's the go through and find the top 5 categories based upon our contracts to find out which ones are coming due over the next 6 to 9 months, that we want to do a deep dive on the strategy of that category, the first, second, third tier suppliers, what would be an optimal supplier solution set, where's the competition, where are the choke points in that activity, send out an RFI that gathers information on capabilities, quality, service delivery, and most notably their activity on innovation, and then set it up in terms of what we want to do for a sourcing plan. And these are all AI agents that the students are running on their own, which is just really exciting.
Very, very cool. I love hearing that. So Maya, why don't you advance us to the next slide? So back in the Stone Ages, when I learned strategic sourcing, dinosaurs were ruling the earth, right? Basically, the automation was non-existent, right? So I remember when I started, we were handed a binder of paper with our sourcing processes, and it told us to go look for information here, there, and everywhere. And everything was done manually, and we had to go through the Porter analysis, the Kraljic matrix. We have to figure out what the needs were, what the risks were, and everything was kind of done offline and poorly. And I guess the interim step between then and sourcing, the way we used to know it 2 years ago, was we had a lot of tools in place now to help us automate the spend analysis, to figuring out what the risks were, and then figuring out who to invite to the dance and all those kinds of things. I mean, Roy, you remember these times, right?
Oh, the Thomas Register with the orange and green books. That's how far back I go.
So now, all these things are being automated to a large extent. And essentially, the way I kind of look at it today is we look into 3 things. Right? Number 1 is sort of like the event creation. Number 2 is then the supplier selection. How do you make that selection? And number 3 is how do you evaluate, negotiate, and award? And we're kind of walk through how things are happening today now with the advent of AI. So why don't we go to the next slide, Maya? So Roy, talk to us about how you're teaching the students about event creation and what you're seeing the best-in-class tools they're doing.
Yeah, so right now, as I mentioned, they're going into that category strategy based upon the spend analytics. So we now have tie-ins to all the contract activity. what contracts are coming due, what new events are happening. Of course, what you want the people to do is to be working with their internal customers, whether it's the production line, engineering, R&D, marketing, advertising, legal. What are they looking at over the next coming year? Not just their spend analytics, which is historical, but what's their budget? Where are they actually thinking of spending their money going forward? And that's huge. When I was at MetLife, almost a third of our suppliers were net new, and that's 6,000 suppliers every year were net new, and basically didn't have any activity because of the changes in what our internal customers were driving. But so once you have an understanding of the budget and you understand which categories you have to go after and have appropriate suppliers, finding the right supplier is literally, I consider it job number one, because you can have the best negotiation with a horrible supplier and you're going to get a horrible result. So making sure that you go deep into the global environment to understand which suppliers are driving innovation, which suppliers have the capability, have the lowest risk structure, highest level of agility and flexibility to be able to get these things done within this environment, i.e. this world where you never know what's shutting down next or what calamity will be around the next corner. And then building up the questions. And I find that the AI tools are doing an amazing job of being able to think outside the box of what information do we need to collect from these suppliers in order to be able to understand their competency and capability in relationship to their peer group. And that step is a crucial RFI type of component, so that you know that you're dealing with the suppliers that are going to meet your expectations short-term and long-term. Actually, that's before the event creation, but that's all the stuff that has to happen before we get into one.
I think it's fascinating to me as I'm seeing customers using the AI-generated questions and how critically important it is to have context related to those types of questions, right? So you could source something relatively been services, for example, and who you are is in terms of the company that you are, who's regulating you, and how critical that service is to you really matters a lot. And then will that help you drive the questions that you ask. For janitorial services, for a company like us, means nothing because customers don't come into our offices. But if you're a bank, it matters a lot because customers come here every day. So that also not only, in terms of like what you're doing, but also how often you do it and how thoroughly you do it could really make a difference.
Significant. And the fun part here is, in at one point in time, people in the sourcing world were like, well, I asked 100 questions. I'm like, okay, how many of them had any weighted value to the decision-making process? And you realize the AI engine can answer 80 of those questions, so you really don't have to go to the supplier and waste their time. I'm a big believer in what I call a low-cost customer. That means I'm trying to drive the cost out of this process so the suppliers can be more profitable and provide me lower holistic cost structures. So that means don't waste their time. I believe the sourcing world still has to learn the fact that salespeople are incredibly valuable, the good ones, and they have a limited amount of time. So they have to decide where they're going to put that time in order to get the best opportunity for them to be able to drive a sale. We need to be able to be transparent with what requirements are as quickly and as effectively as possible so that we get the best suppliers wanting to do business with us, which is going to lead to a greater result as we generate the next step, which is the RFP, and then the timing of it, which let me jump into that. The whole concept is people go, well, how long does it take you? I said, I don't care. If I start early enough, as long as I finish the contract before you need the material, I'm fine. Did it take me a year? Did it take me 3 weeks? Not relevant. It is, did I get the work I need to do to offer the most optimal suppliers with the most risk-reduced contractual relationships to the internal customer when they need it? And I think there's got to be a real determination. It's not how fast you get it done. It's how effectively you get it done before it's needed.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And the other thing that I think AI is getting better at now, and we're getting better at writing, the questions, is AI can suggest the best ways of actually getting the questions answered. So, for example, a pick list to say, yes, we do this today, out of the box, we do it with customization or modifications. We do it, it's part of our roadmap or it's not part of our roadmap at all, so that you actually can automatically score questions and not rely on people reading it or AI reading it for that matter. And so I think, number one, getting a structured question set that are best, answers your questions. Number two is then normalizing those things so that you sort of focus on the right things. So again, you don't waste people's time.
Yeah, when you focus on those right things, you're going to get the best result from those suppliers as well, as long as you give them the data they need in order to be able to provide you that. I'm sure you've experienced it, but when you switch from the sourcing side and then into the sales, like when I ran my own company and I had to sell these services, how many sourcing people were cutting and pasting from a wrong category and then just giving it to you? And it's like, this is not even relevant. And he goes, oh, I copied it from another event. I said, you're just wasting my time. Yep. It's really unfortunate.
All right. Next slide, Maya. So now that you've got your RFP out the door, you got those responses back. How is AI helping us select the suppliers?
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about the setting up those questions and how those questions are developed. One is some level of those questions have to be such that they can be easily comparable, right? So you have, quantitative analysis that says, oh, this supplier has a 50% improvement in delivery, or has a 80% larger capability to get to your needed quantity on time in the locations that you need. So as much of that quantitative stuff, where you can now have a clear audit trail. So if someone ever asks you, well, why did you select supplier C? You clearly show where supplier C has an edge in terms of the quantitative issues. And that can all be done by AI. Then you get into the qualitative level, and that's where you want to be able to spend more time to understand the nuances. Is this going to be a good fit within our culture? Is this suppliers understand the activities that are driving my internal customers, the R&D activity, the innovation, my customer base? Do they resonate in that structure? And that is such that the AI engines are not very good at, actually to the point where they're horrible at. And therefore, we need to bring that within the discussions with our internal customers. And that's qualitative versus quantitative. Qualitative, give it to AI. Quantitative, that's where you, the sourcing leader, should be really driving.
All right. Maya, why don't you jump to the next slide? And now, as you sort of get into evaluation and award, so the whole idea of AI autonomously recommending a supplier, negotiating with the supplier, and basically getting to an award. What do you see out there?
It is so fun out there now. So if I look at the tail, which so few people are touching, there is agentic AI negotiation bots that are doing a great job of not only bidding it out with the right criteria, with your guidance and selection process, but being able to find the supplier, connecting with the supplier based upon the information, updating the supplier information so that you have accurate information on that supplier, everything from their banking information to their certification levels. All that can be done in the agentic AI world. And then when it gets down to it, because you've created the structure, the criteria of what a success looks like, it can negotiate on your behalf within those criteria in order to be able to get to an optimal negotiated solution with this supplier's salesperson or the supplier's negotiation bot. And they can get to the point where it says, yeah, this is a win-win for both sides. And that's for the tail, which basically can still save you a ton of money. It can get things under contract, which is going to reduce your risk on those things that you never touched before, but it's going to do it without a lot of human interaction. So that takes care of a lot of potentially thousands of suppliers, thousands of contracts that can be easily auditable. Then you can spend more and more of your time on the A and B items, which are really crucial to the success of your company, where you have a split where you say, okay, bot, you negotiate these types of terms, conditions, delivery schedules, maybe first level holistic pricing structure, while I spend more time on the specifications, the innovation categories, the activity. And therefore, just like as if you had 2 or 3 members of your team, the bot is one member of the team that can go after activity or follow up with the activity, keep people up on schedule with the activity. All those things are good uses of the agentic AI bot.
Do you think that organizations are hands off for some of these things? I mean, for me as a procurement guy, right, it's a little bit scary now to sort of be hands off.
Yeah, I would suggest to you that there's air traffic controller concepts. The idea is that, okay, this bot's going off doing 10, 20, 30 a day. Can you see what's happening? Do you get feedback, reports? The bot can actually highlight areas where there's difficulty or constraints or delays. Therefore, you can target your time and attention on the areas which it's needed. And the areas that are just going through smoothly, you see the results. It is going to be very much a system generate, agentic AI generated flow, and it's going to highlight the areas that you need to be more involved in. Again, as you get to the A items, the bot's just one of your team members, and you're watching over that really closely because it's a part of a integrated solution set that you're trying to negotiate.
Yeah, I was talking to a CPO of a very large healthcare network a few weeks ago, and they went from having 100 buyers to having 17 buyers, and everything else was handled by AI. And everything was going really great until one of the models drifted. And basically, as the model drifted, it influenced all the other bots, or all the other agents, and things went off the rails real fast. And to me, it's fascinating how an organization can literally remove 83% of the workforce and use that air traffic control concept that you talked about. But again, as you were saying before, it is tailspin related. And it's fascinating what is possible.
In the tailspin, though, it's important to somebody, to the host, right? It still needs to get done. You want to improve the process, but you have to make sure that you have the controls in place and not just walk away. Now, if you can get rid of 83% of your transactional, that's a lot of labor costs. Now, so the question now becomes, from some of those labor costs, can you bring in some expertise to be able to do the audit trails and the management and the control functions? So have the right number of skill sets funded by that reduction that keeps the AI bots in line and keeps them under control, because it is not a set and forget. It is not. This stuff moves too quickly. It's too dynamic, and it can be outside or jump the rails, as you say, easily enough. So take some of those savings and maybe give higher level people that can be able to watch and control it and report on it more effectively. And then, of course, I strongly suggest you use some of those savings to raise up the compensation level and the skill levels of those sourcing people that are going after your A items, so that you can be a partner with your internal customers. You can actually be an advocate. They actually come to you because you're hiring people that have the knowledge and skill sets that are going to be supportive of what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and we can go on and on about the impacts of succession planning and talent pool and all that other stuff, right? Because we all learn how to do stuff based on doing junior level work, and if all that goes away, it's kind of interesting, right?
Yeah, true.
So Maya, can you move to the next slide, please? So this is sort of my hypothesis, and I would love to understand what you think about this, Roy, right? So I think the future around AI sourcing is going to be more strategic as things go by. So the three phases we talked about are relatively, I would argue, tactical in nature. It's like building an RFP, deciding which suppliers to participate, and then negotiating a tailspin deal. And what I would say is that where we're going to get to next is having AI help us create overarching category sourcing strategies that brings together data like spend analysis, but also contract data, requirements data, external analysis data to help us figure out where do we have the most leverage to maximize, our spend dollars, right? And then you can use something like a focal point to automatically configure the processes using workflow and help that pushing it through the pipeline. And I think we're going to get there sooner than we think. We're heads down right now building a category management solution that obviously is a bit more heavyweight than a part of a sourcing engagement. But this is kind of where I see things going. How do you feel about that, Roy?
Yeah, I believe if you only talk about the sourcing event and the closure to contract, you're only seeing 10% of the true value. What Focal Point's working on now in terms of pulling all that pre-data together to saying, hey, this is what we're expecting. This is what we've negotiated to. Now, how do we help our internal customers and our suppliers optimize that contract and that relationship in order to be able to make sure that we have better and better solutions, innovation, that delivers on the expectations to not only our internal customers, but to our external customers, and that we track it and control it with data points that we never had before. And this is the fun part. When you start to realize, okay, I'm going to have fewer and fewer people, hopefully higher and higher compensation levels. I've got more data elements. Well, how are you going to manage all that data? Well, guess what? It's going to have to be an AI-based solution to absorb all that data, look for trends, look for areas of concern, look for areas where you need to take action, have the AI agent, issue warnings or concerns or requests in order to get it started, and then be able to track those items and come back to you. Goes, okay, here's your list of action items. Suppliers 1, 5, and 7 are seems like there's a problem that we have to work on, and we're only talking right now first tier. When we start getting to second tier and third tier suppliers, now it's you go from 18,000 suppliers to 180,000 suppliers to 1 million suppliers. That amount of data load just is not possible. But your knowledge base can go back from you to your top suppliers to make sure they're doing their best. Because what I started to find is my savings weren't coming from negotiations with my tier suppliers, but helping my first tier suppliers get a better deal from my second tier suppliers, their first tier suppliers.
Right, and I think bring up a very good point. One of the things that we need to look at now as part of sourcing is the whole idea of the cost breakdown structure of whatever services are being provided. So what's material, what's labor, what's transportation, and so on, and keeping a finger on the pulse on how those things are moving. And there's really no limit to how deep you can go with these things, right? Because a lot of these are geography dependent, risk dependent. So where do you stop? I think that's
it goes back to, I believe that once you have this in control, it's never set and forget. Let's just make sure, never set and forget. It is a constant dynamic activity, but it allows you to look at your job descriptions, which I'm a big fan of. Like, you got to fix your job descriptions. You have to make your job descriptions, mirror the work that needs to be done. And those are higher skilled people with greater capability, years of experience in those areas, such as advertising or legal or manufacturing or whatever product or service that you're buying. You need to have experts that understand it from the supplier's perspective, from the internal customer's perspective. And then what's really exciting is we get to spend more and more time with our internal customers. Where are you going? What are you trying to accomplish? I've got suppliers that can meet those expectations. Why? Because I've got that data in my back pocket now to say, I can present to you suppliers that are going to meet your next generation requirements. Then we become valuable to the internal customer because they don't have the time or the capability to be able to find all those suppliers on a global basis to be able to make that happen. That's when we become that strategic partner with our internal customers, which we talk about a lot. But I tell you, unless you change your skill sets and change the data you can bring forward, that's just a fake dream.
Amazing. I appreciate that so much. Maya, why don't we move to the next slide? We're wrapping up here. So this little eye chart that you see in front of you now is how Focal Point builds your supplier questionnaires. So you can see here that you ask the assistant to come up with questions for a specific event. And the agent basically comes up with the questions, and then you can select which ones to include, and you keep on building it until you're done. And as you can see on the left-hand side, these are all the surveys that we have pre-built as part of using that AI capability. So again, these are things we can select.
I would suggest that this eye chart is just that, but it does trigger the idea, like, man, a demo in this space by your listeners, because what you've already presented and developed is going to save them a ton of time and create greater accuracy and results, and then lead them into that more automated future. I mean, the work is amazing.
And Maya, next slide, please. And here are another couple of artifacts that we sort of developed sort of agentically, right? So this financial stability report that you see, it's obviously from Microsoft, right? So it's a relatively safe company, but being able to sort of say, I need these 3 metrics to come up with an overall financial stability assessment, and you can automatically pull the ticker symbols and come up with that evaluation as soon as you drag and drop a supplier into an event. I mean, it's very, very powerful when you kind of know where you're standing. And the other thing here you see on the right-hand side of the screen is AI recommending which suppliers to pick and moving sort of that forward through the pipeline and makes things much, much faster, right? So this is not a sales shtick, but this is supposed to be sort of like the art of the possible. And obviously you can get into collecting SOC 2s and certificates of insurance and other supplier evaluations, all that other good stuff. Even G2 assessments on the space, like all those kinds of things are can automatically be pulled in. So it's kind of cool, right? So that's it for today. My last slide. So basically now we have 2 things we want to talk about. Number one is, if you need to understand more about what we talked about today, that's the QR code on the left. And if you want to register for our May 27th event, which is all about AI power category management, which I am very, very nerdy about. I love the whole idea of AI powered category management and what this is going to bring us into the future. So please register and reach out for more information. Roy, thanks a lot for your participation as always. It's super nice to be with you, and I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.